afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another edition of the Democratic View. I'm the hostess, and my name is Phyllis Italiano. And today I have with me a paisano, Dan Gulizio, who is our Peconic Baykeeper, which is a very, very, very important job these days with our quality of water in such jeopardy, I might add.
It is.
So what we would like to know is a little bit about you. So where were you born and raised and all that kind of stuff?
I was born and raised in Suffolk County. I actually grew up in the town of Islip in the hamlet of Hauppauge. Went to public school in Hauppauge and spent my whole life really in the county except for time away in college.
Where did you go to school?
I went to undergraduate at Colby College. It's in Waterville, Maine, central Maine. I used to tease my parents that of all the schools I got accepted into, they sent me to the one that was furthest away. But I went to undergraduate school at Colby, and then I have a master's in planning from Columbia University, and I have a law degree from St. John's University.
And so what did you do after you got out of graduate school?
Yeah, that's, well, when I graduated from Colby, I started work as a summer job for the Town of Islip Planning Department as a summer intern. And I ended up really liking the job, and it was very interesting. I had something of an interest in architecture, and we looked at site plans and subdivision maps, and ended up staying on there and then going to graduate school while I was working.
Uh-huh. Well, that's good.
Yeah.
Did you put yourself through graduate school?
I did. The town had a program which provided tuition assistance also, but I did it while I was working full-time.
Oh, great.
Yeah, it was very interesting.
So you were always kind of involved in Suffolk County?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, my whole life.
Yeah.
Yeah. I worked as a planner at the town of Islip, as a planner at the town of Brookhaven. I was commissioner of planning of both of those departments, and I worked very briefly in Nassau County as their deputy director of planning, and I was also the deputy director of planning for Suffolk County before coming to Baykeeper.
You follow in the footsteps of a very famous man, Lee Koppelman, who was also a planner.
Yes.
Who I've often quoted because he said if he knew what was going to happen, he would have bought up every available acre. And Lord knows, I wish he had. So how did you get to the Peconic Baykeeper?
That's a great question. Well, after I left planning at Suffolk County, I started my own not-for-profit called the Community Planning Center, working with civic groups and advocacy groups to help get more people engaged in government. At the same time, I was also a board member with Peconic Baykeeper. And when there was a change in the organization and the executive director's position became available, I spoke to the board about it and came on board as the executive director, and really haven't looked back since. It's been a great experience.
I can imagine. It must be wonderful. You know, I only live here for one reason. I live here because I love Gardiner's Bay. I'm passionately in love with Gardiner's Bay. And I swim every day, twice a day, if I can.
Good for you.
I won't have breakfast unless I swim. It has to be pouring or freezing. Mm-hmm. But I always say that water quality of that bay is so wonderful that I can see. Today I was watching little bluefish. You know, the what do you call them? The little fish, the baby bluefish.
Bait fish.
I've been watching them hopping all around, and it was just amazing. And I was standing there waiting to go in because the water is so wonderful. And now I read yesterday that Lake Ronkonkoma, which is a lake that I used to pass as a child, go by and look at that beautiful lake, has been now closed one more time to bathers because of its contamination. And it's really breaks my heart to think about things like that.
Sure.
And what is the state of our water?
Well, it's kind of ironic in that we can look at our waters, our surface waters, and they look beautiful. You look out at the Peconic estuary, and it's one of the most beautiful estuaries in the country. But there are a growing threat, really a litany of threats to our water quality, both our drinking water supply, which is below us, below our feet in our grounds, and our surface water supplies. We have nitrogen, which is a leading contaminant of both ground and surface water, has increased by more than 200% between 1987 and 2005, so 200% increase. That's been linked to public health threats. It's been linked to an increase in the frequency and intensity of harmful algal blooms, those things that are closed beaches sometimes. It's been linked to shellfish declines, so that's one of the leading contaminants, and it's been increasing at an alarming rate. We also have VOCs, or volatile organic compounds, that impact our drinking water supplies, our groundwater. They have doubled in concentration and quadrupled in frequency over the last 15 to 20 years.
BOTs?
VOCs, volatile organic compounds.
What is that?
That comes from industrial solvents and other chemicals that we use in everyday purposes, and somehow they find their way into our soils and into our drinking water supplies. County health department officials have also told us now that they've detected 117 different pesticide-related compounds in our drinking water supplies, 117. Now that's treated at the wellhead through a very costly process, so our water is safe to drink, our public water, but that array of contaminants and toxins in our water should be really a concern for everybody. And we can see the impacts on our surface waters as well, because our groundwaters and surface waters are linked. We see those contaminants that are in our groundwater find their way into our surface waters, and we see, again, the increase in harmful algal blooms. We see an increase in the decline of the shellfish populations. On an annual basis, we have between 10 and 30,000 acres of shellfish beds closed due to toxins. And then we have the array of bathing beaches that are closed. Last summer, 2014, there were over 66 beaches that were either issued beach closures or beach advisories by the county health department over 238 times total combined. So those are really, I think, indicators of a system and an ecosystem under stress, and we need to start changing the way we treat it if we want to see improvement.
Well, the first time I saw you speak, Dan, was at a little forum that was held in East Hampton through our natural resources woman, Kim Shaw. Mm-hmm. And you gave an amazing history of Suffolk County. And I'm sure that there are many people out there who do not know what Suffolk County was like.
Sure. We all have, some of us been in here as long as I've been here, have memories of what Suffolk County was like and how much it's changed, but it changed incredibly rapidly over a very short period of time following World War II. And just look at some basic population numbers. In 1950, the county had a population of roughly 276,000 residents, 276,000 in 1950. However, by 1960, that number was over 666,000 residents, an increase of 141%. And then 10 years later, it was 1.1 million.
Oh my God. Oh my God.
So that 20-year period saw an increase from 276,000 to 1.1 million, an increase of 840,000 odd residents. About 42,000 residents a year increase every year for 20 years.
My God.
It's a big number.
That's an amazing number.
Right.
That's an amazing number, and boy, what they bring with them.
Sure.
We all know what they bring with them. Besides the fact that we have, and I don't care who you are, if you build a house today and put in a septic system, it's out of date.
Sure.
Because it does not mitigate nitrogen.
Right.
And that is something that we're hoping that Suffolk County is going to tell us soon what are some kinds of septic systems that we can switch to that will do the job and not affect our groundwater.
Sure, that's one piece of the puzzle that's very important. But if you really want to talk about kind of the story of Suffolk County's water, it's really death by 1,000 cuts. And that we have these septic systems, individual homes that are on septic systems and old cesspools that don't remove nitrogen. They're a big impact. There's over 300,000 of them, and certainly that's an issue. But we also have pockets of high-density development tied to sewage treatment plants. And what a lot of people don't know is that even though sewage treatment plants remove nitrogen or other contaminants, reduce the amount of nitrogen and contaminants from development, they don't eliminate it. And when sewage treatment plants are tied to these dramatic increases in development density, as they have been in Suffolk County, they're actually responsible for loading more contaminants than an individual septic system with low-density development. That's something a lot of people don't know. They think if they just put it into a sewage treatment plant, everything's okay, but sewage treatment plants just reduce the amount of pollutants. And when they're tied or linked to dramatic increases in development density, as they are increasingly today, we actually can have more impacts with that type of high-density development, even when tied to a state-of-the-art sewage treatment plant, than with low-density development on a septic system.
Oh, wow.
And the densities that we're seeing are unprecedented, really, throughout our county. Density through Suffolk County, in other words, the number of single-family homes per acre, averages throughout the county. Western Suffolk is much more dense than Eastern Suffolk. Western Suffolk averages between 4 and 6 housing units per acre. Eastern Suffolk, the 5 East End towns, is about 1 unit per acre when you add up all the residential property. So 90% of the county's population is actually in Western Suffolk. But even with that, we see these dramatic impacts on East End water quality due to the development that we have. But this next wave of development that we're seeing in the last 10 years, and that is actually pending right now, the development densities, even tied to sewage treatment plants, are disturbing to me as a planner, as an environmentalist, because we're seeing densities of 35 units per acre, 50 units per acre, 100 units per acre, even 155 units to the acre, including some developments right out here in the East End.
Holy mackerel. I mean, I know of one place in East Quogue where there's now a question of a golf course with a group of homes, and it's right over the pine barrens, and
Sure.
it really has to, you have to scratch your head to wonder why they would even think about allowing that. You know, developers, really.
Well, here's a couple of facts that are important to keep in mind about development, is that even if we acquired every single remaining open space parcel that's left in the county, we already have a water quality problem, so it wouldn't fix that problem. So when we're adding to it, even when it's a little bit that we're adding to it, it's a cause for concern. And when we look at some of the development patterns that we have, again, these densities of 100 units to the acre that are being proposed, sometimes right here in the East End. Downtown Riverhead approved a project a couple of years ago known as Summerwind. It's 52 housing units and a full floor of commercial space on 1/3 of 1 acre. That's a density of 155 units to the acre. Even when tied to a sewage treatment plant as that is, there's an impact on water quality, whether it's groundwater or it's surface water.
And I remember Riverhead when it was a little town like this with nothing in it.
And that's the most important thing, if your listeners and if anybody interested in water quality, the most important thing to keep in mind is that we didn't inherit poor water quality. It's not a naturally occurring event that we're dealing with.
Oh, I know.
We caused it.
That's right.
We caused it through a combination of decades of unsustainable development patterns, ineffective sanitary standards, and a decision-making process that's really driven not by the need to protect our public health or our environmental quality, but to really promote special interest needs. And that's something that we need to address if we want to fix water quality. Throwing billions at the problem in the form of new infrastructure won't fix it if we don't treat the underlying cause, which are these policies and our regulatory process. You know, there's 3,143 counties in the United States, 3,143. Suffolk County has the least restrictive unsewered residential sanitary standards out of all 3,143 counties, according to the health department.
Does Mr. Malone know this?
Well, that's part of what needs to be addressed, because at the same time, those population numbers we were talking about before, Suffolk County is now 1.5 million people. That's larger in population than 11 states. It's the 23rd most populated county in the entire country out of those 3,000 counties, and it's the 81st densest county out of those 3,000 odd counties. So if you took Suffolk County and you made it a country, it would be the 9th densest country on earth right now. More dense than India, more dense than Japan, and just slightly less dense than Bangladesh.
Okay, and when you say use the word dense, you mean
People per square mile.
That's right. That's what I wanted to get across to people, that they understand what density means.
Right.
It means how many people are living in a
Specific space.
specific
Right.
piece of land.
Yeah.
And that's really, than India?
Yeah.
Come on, holy mackerel.
So when you're one of the most populated places in the country and one of the most dense places in the world, and you have the least restrictive sanitary standards, poor water quality really shouldn't be a surprise. It's the predictable outcome or byproduct of that combination of factors. So if we want to fix it, do we need more improved sanitary infrastructure? Absolutely. But we also have to fix the underlying problem, which is these unsustainable development practices and ineffective sanitary standards. And if we don't fix those two things, we're really not going to fix water quality in a sustainable way.
Oh, I can't close my mouth.
Yeah.
Holy mackerel.
Right.
It's a very, I say all the time to people, you have to understand that if you can't drink the water, what you have is worthless. Right. And so, because I interview guys like you, I'm going to know. I'm going to be the first guy to know my house is going to be on the market while all those other guys are still scratching their head and saying, well, maybe, maybe I'll just, they're still thinking that the water comes from the Croton Reservoir, and it's amazing to realize how at risk we are, really at risk.
The important thing to keep in mind too, and I want to stay positive on this, is as great as the risks are, and they are, they're not insignificant. It's critical that we start to change our behavior immediately. But as challenging as the problems are, they're not as challenging as we might think in order to fix them. We can fix them. We created these problems. We can certainly fix them too. We have to start thinking differently and acting differently in terms of how we regulate land. That's really the key.
And we also have to think about, as individuals, those of us who live in our own homes, we have to think about what we bring into our house and what we put in our gardens and our lawns. I mean, I don't get this whole thing about having this, unbelievably green lawn with every little blade of grass. I don't care what's out there, It's just cut it, and that's it. And it's amazing that I remember back on Fire Island that there was a time where they were putting phosphates into soaps, and Suffolk County immediately stopped, and we were not allowed to bring in Tide, and we had to buy only local, locally clean, soaps for our washing machines. Right. So why aren't they making those kind of laws?
Well, they are starting to, but I think more needs to be done. They are starting to better regulate things like fertilizer usage, but I think we also need to do a better job of not just focusing on nitrogen and look at some of the other contaminants.
Yes.
Because just like I characterize our water quality problems as death by 1,000 cuts, it means there's probably 1,000 things we can each do to help improve the problem. But it's not just the homeowner's problem. That's the other thing that's important to keep in mind, is that we've had a host of environmental organizations doing great work over the last couple of decades. They're hardworking, they're experts in their field, they're sincere, they do their absolute best on a daily basis to try to improve quality of life. And we've also spent, just through the East End Community Preservation Fund and the county's 0.25% Drinking Water Protection Fund, over $2 billion, with a B, $billion, preserving open space to protect water quality. And despite all of those efforts, water quality has declined. So if we want to fix the problem, like Einstein said, insanity is defined as the willingness to repeat the same mistakes over and over and anticipating different results, we need to do things differently. So yes, do we need to help encourage better treatment? Yes. We also need to do a better job of pollution prevention. Because the idea shouldn't be, let's invest billions in infrastructure to filter pollutants. Let's stop them from going in the first place. We can do that as homeowners. We can do a better job with that as businesses. And quite honestly, government needs to do a better job regulating that process.
Yes, I know one of the people I've also interviewed was a couple of guys who came on about medication.
Yes.
How people throw medication into toilets and it gets flushed down. And you can go to South Thrifty in Southampton, and actually you can even go to your local drugstore here in White's, and they will take any medication that you have not going to use again, and they will take it back and dispose of it in a proper way, or not in your toilet.
Right. We're learning. We've been kind of slow on the uptake, but we have learned that the best way of disposing these things is not to flush them down the toilet. There are programs available. You can return medicines, pharmaceutical products to your local pharmacy, even to police stations. So we want to make sure we encourage people to think of those alternatives and not just out of sight, throw it in your garbage, and it gets into a landfill, or throw it down the toilet and it gets into our water quality. So certainly there's a host of options that are out there for people now, and we're learning every day to do a better job. But again, the clock is ticking. We need to really act quickly if we want to prevent even more harm, because we are seeing those pharmaceuticals and personal care products popping up in our drinking water supplies and our surface waters.
I wish they would come out with some kind of a list of the kinds of things that are, I use, because I shop at a sort of an organic store, Wild by Nature. I only use things like seventh generation, things like that, but a lot of people don't realize, it comes from running your dishwasher, soaps you use, all these kinds of things are very important for our own drinking water.
You're absolutely right. And the thing to keep in mind also is, government today across the board, from the federal level on down to our local levels, they're all strapped for cash, right? So everybody's concerned about tight budgets. So I think one of the things we need to do if we're going to be efficient and we're going to be logical and methodical in our approach to fixing this problem is understand that we're getting these contaminants into our groundwaters and our surface waters from multiple sources. So the better job we do in understanding where those loads are coming from, how much is coming from sewage treatment plants, how much are coming from septic systems, how much are coming from agricultural uses and personal lawns, the better understanding we have for that, how much is coming from atmospherically through deposition, because we get that also from the air, which, not to depress you too much, but there are 62 counties in New York State. Suffolk County has actually the worst ozone pollution out of all 62 counties.
Oh.
So we need to understand all of those loads so we can then use our resources as efficiently as possible so that we can get the biggest bang for our buck.
I'm kind of shaking.
Sorry, I have a lot of statistics.
I'm shaking in my boots over here about all of this stuff.
Yeah.
So we have to help our governments. I'm hoping that when Suffolk County now is testing, I think in a year and a half, we'll know what septic systems will be reasonable in purchase price, and will have the ability to mitigate some of the things that we don't want in our groundwater. And when they can tell us that, I was also hoping that there would be some kind of way in which they would help to finance some of these changes for people. We know that the governor is still sitting on a bunch of money from Sandy, and it's time that money went into something like that to alleviate, our problems here in Suffolk County. And just like they did when we had to fill up our oil tanks and put them above ground, they gave you a little tax rebate, and I think that we need some kind of help like that so that people will have an incentive to do the right thing. Because doing the right thing can sometimes be very hard if you're a little strapped for cash, or you are unaware. I don't know how you could be unaware unless you're dead, but there are an awful lot of people
No, I couldn't agree more with that. And one of the things we see from an equity standpoint also is some of our highest density areas are also some of our poorest areas.
That's true.
So when we have these kind of pockets of poverty, they don't have 30,000, 25,000 to do a state-of-the-art, enhanced on-site septic system with nitrogen removal. So we need to figure out a way to address that. There seems to be a lot of money thrown at the idea of new sewage treatment plants. And the state gave Suffolk County $383 million. They gave them another $40 million grant to enhance existing systems, to expand existing systems. Suffolk County is putting, I think it's $207 million into a new outfall pipe for the Bergen Point plant. They've approved a 10 million gallon per day expansion of that plant. And that's great, because we do need to improve the effectiveness of those sewage treatment plants. But at the same time, if that's just going to lead to even greater densities, which means even more nitrogen loading and more pollutant loading into our aquifers, into our surface waters, then we're not really accomplishing anything. So we'd like to see that same type of commitment that's being given towards funding sewer infrastructure and potentially development to helping the individual homeowners with their plight, because they can't afford it, quite honestly, the average person.
Well, you certainly have given us a lot to think about, and I hope that everybody pays attention and understands that we are either going to take care of it or we're going to lose this place. Thank you so much for coming, Dan.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, I must say, we're going to have you back.
Pleasure. Oh, I would love to.
Yeah, because you really are the man with the information
Thank you.
that we need.
I appreciate you giving us the opportunity to talk about these issues that are so important.
Yes, indeed. It's called education.
Yes.
That's what I do for a living. I did, anyway.